I'm really excited to be here with you all this week, and I know that yesterday and today we've really focused on having important conversations about the future of sustainable agriculture, and by extension, our food system. And as we continue today to share our perspectives, our hopes, and our ideas, we gain new insights on these promising ideas and hopes for the future. And then we take all of this back with us when we go home and do the good work that we're all doing every day. So this morning, we're going to continue the conversation by hearing from some outstanding food system experts. And so I'm going to introduce our panelists for the morning, and when I say their name, I'll ask that they each come up on stage. Before I do that, I just want you all to know we're going to extend the panel into the break about 10 minutes, so we'll wrap up around 10:10. I hope that's okay with everyone. I hope you stay around and participate in the discussion. Much like our panel yesterday morning, I'll kind of start off by asking the panelists to say a few opening remarks, and then we'll dive into an interactive discussion. And so you all have note cards on your tables like yesterday, and so if you could please be thinking of questions in the first 5 to 10 minutes, and then at some point in the beginning, I'll call for you to hand your questions to SARE and ATRA staff around the room who will bring them up to us on stage, and we'll get started. So, without further ado, I would like to introduce our first panelist. This panelist coached me on the right way to say Appalachian, not Appalachian, which I'm very thankful for. So Charlie Jackson is the executive director and a founder of the Appalachian Sustainable Agriculture Project, a nonprofit organization in the Southern Appalachians that helps local farms thrive, links farmers to markets, and builds healthy communities. Prior to this role, Charlie gained experience training farmers in marketing and farm profitability, developing and implementing local food campaigns, and creating local food systems that are socially just, health-promoting, and sustainable. Charlie was inducted into the Western North Carolina Agricultural Hall of Fame in 2017. Welcome, Charlie. Our next panelist is Stephanie Millie Grant. Stephanie is the Senior Manager of External Affairs and Sustainability for Unilever. She works with brands, procurement, suppliers, and farmers to implement Unilever's Sustainable Agriculture Code and to deliver its sustainable sourcing goals. Prior to this role, Stephanie was a vice president with Stateside Associates, where she worked on agriculture and conservation issues for a major equipment manufacturer and for the Department of Defense. Thank you, Stephanie, for joining us. Our final panelist for today is Beth Robertson Martin. Beth leads the organic and non-GMO sourcing group at General Mills. She focuses on developing deep industry relationships to create new alliances and break down barriers. Prior to this role, Beth led sustainable sourcing groups in the furniture and apparel industry, and also developed risk management strategies and portfolio management techniques in the financial industry. She grew up in a farming family in southeastern Missouri, not too far from here. Welcome, Beth. We were originally going to have a fourth guest for the panel today, but he was unable to make it. So as we move into our discussion today, can everyone hear me okay? Okay. Thank you. I would love it if you could all start off by taking a couple minutes and telling us about something you're working on that you're really excited about right now. So maybe we could start with Stephanie.
Sure. Thank you for having me today. For those of you who don't know who Unilever is, I usually mention a few of our products. We make everything from Ben & Jerry's ice cream to Hellmann's mayonnaise to Dove soap, Vaseline, Q-tips. So that kind of gives you an idea of what might be in your pantries and your closets at home. For me, something we're working on, and we just made a kind of a big change in how we're doing our sustainable sourcing programs. We're starting to really look at the impact of type programs of what we can do. So we just relaunched our Hellmann's Sustainable Soy Program in the beginning of the year. We had been kind of encouraging and had a small pilot on cover crops and some different things within and trying to encourage continuous improvement. We made a change and decided that we wanted to invest in cover crops and soil health. So we had over 700 farmers in our program before, and we relaunched it, opened it up to them, and asked them to consider doing cover crops to be part of our program. So within the first 3 months, we've had, I think, about 77 just sign up here. We have a partnership with the Practical Farmers of Iowa to make sure that we want them to have a great experience with that. We've made a 5-year commitment that we'll be investing in this, and we think that's really important for healthy soils and especially all the soils coming out of Iowa. So a number of the issues going on in Iowa, we think this is something that's very important to the future of the state.
That's awesome. Thank you. Charlie?
Yeah, I'm Charlie Jackson. I'm the director of ASAP. We're a nonprofit that's located in western North Carolina in the Appalachian Mountains, and it was great listening to the ATRA folks. I was trying to farm in the 90s, and ATRA publications got me growing all kinds of crazy stuff. And, and when those showed up in the mailbox, you know, that was a big deal. It was a big opportunity to try something new, so I appreciate that, and thank you. We've been working on local food system development in western North Carolina and the southern Appalachian region for 20 years now, and Sammy's asking me what I'm excited about in this coming year, and you know, it's just been a wonderful thing to see the interest and the movement toward localizing food systems, and we're this year launching an initiative called Healthy Eating in Practice, and it's designed to connect healthcare providers to local food systems and to have the people that are working in health, physicians and dietitians and others that are working in health fields to better understand food and where it comes from, and have those kind of experiences that we all have that are changing our lives that then help them go back in their practices and change their patients' lives. And so we're going to have a conference this August in Asheville, North Carolina, and we hope to have 500 physicians and other healthcare practitioners there, and we're going to take them out to farms, and we're going to take them to farm-to-school projects, and going to really let them see where that food's coming from, so when they go back, they can inspire their patients and their communities.
Wow, that's great. Thank you.
I'm Beth Robertson Martin, and I lead the organic and non-GMO sourcing group at General Mills. And that I did grow up not far from here on a small-scale vegetable farm. Grandma Elvira was in a jug band, and every man in my family is named some version of Billy. But my path took me kind of far away from that, but here I am back again. If you look up the definition of irony in the dictionary, it's me, because I'm just now trying to convince everybody to do the same thing that my family did when I was little. What am I working on that we're most excited about? So General Mills is trying to figure out how to package weeds. How do we grow weeds? How do we put weeds in a box of mac and cheese? How do we make it easier for farmers to do what's right for their soil? And how do we convince consumers to pay for it? That's what I'm working on, which I would not be here today, actually, if I had not met Eric Lee Motter, the co-director of the Xerces pollinator program, about 5 years ago, on a dusty tomato field in Williams, California, looking at an installation of a pollinator habitat. Standing in the middle of a dirt road, this profound experience of, on one side, this desolate post-apocalyptic wasteland of nothingness, and on the other side is a habitat filled with life that you can just hear the difference. And on the way home, actually it might have been about 3 years ago, I was on the plane reading Lentil Underground, as I'm sure all of us have, and I got to just what it seems like a throwaway line, which was the introduction of Doug and Anna Crabtree's farm in Havre, Montana. And the line was, as the author turned and saw the farm, it was as if a family garden had been shrunk, and it was under a magnifying glass, but it was instead a 1,200-acre farm. And I just burst into tears and ugly crying, like Minnie Driver in Good Will Hunting, ugly crying, not that nice, just tears. And I thought, that's what I want. That's what we need to be working towards, is how do we expand that garden philosophy to all of agriculture in a big way. And so, we can talk more over the course of this panel about how the journey at General Mills has gotten us from that first habitat in Williams, California, to now figuring out how to put multi-crop rotations from individual farmers into a box of bunnygrams. But that's what I'm most excited about. Is how do we support farmers and basically sell weeds?
That's awesome. And General Mills recently, because General Mills owns Annie's, right?
Yes.
So I saw that there was recently a product that came out from Annie's that was a mac and cheese made from produce grown or grains grown by a farmer using diverse rotational practices. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so we are really trying to support soil health through both broad industry partnerships, like Unilever is doing. We've got the Soil Health Institute. We've made a big financial commitment to soil health over the next 10 years, as well as our greenhouse gas reductions. But then most of what my job entails is figuring out how we do that and have the individual brands at General Mills. So our natural and organic brands include things like Annie's, Epic, Bar, Muir Glen, Cascadian Farm. And so one of the things we did is through the Annie's brand, we actually partnered with two farmers in Montana, Casey Bailey, another Lentil Underground graduate, and connection through Doug and Anna, and Nate Paul Palm, who is a young farmer who's got about 250 acres in Montana as well. And we figured out what crops were good for their rotation for this particular recent year, and took 2 crops off of each farm, and did a fully segregated supply chain throughout the process from harvest to finished product. And so from Casey's farm, we have oats and wheat, and those are going into a special edition bunnygram. And then from Nate's farm, we've got yellow peas and durum, which we turned into mac and cheese. And both of those just hit the store at Sprouts, actually, so it'll be a Sprouts special edition. So that was a really fun, almost impossible project to work on because it's a couple hundred acres for a company like General Mills, and finding partners who would support us through that. And so the idea now is to figure out how to scale that.
Yeah, that's huge. Good work.
Thanks.
I would just like to say, please feel free to hold your question cards up now if you have them, and we'll have our SARE and address staff come and collect those. So Stephanie, I'm curious what kinds of challenges you've run into or you think you're going to run into with some of your projects, in particular the one you mentioned,
Sure.
As it relates to the food system and sustainable ag.
One of the biggest challenges we have is we do not direct contract for anything we buy. We're buying through the ABCD grain originators. So it's been definitely a challenge in getting these programs up because we don't have that direct contract or the direct even relationship with the farmers to establish these programs. So some of our suppliers are much more willing and easy to work with to implement these types of programs than others. So it's been a learning process, and it can be challenging within that at times if they aren't overly willing to help us communicate or bring in farmers or recruit farmers into this program because they're the ones who have those direct relationships and we don't. The other couple challenges I'm seeing right now, or just it's been through, is especially when you get to conventional and farmers who have been doing this practice or their practices for the last 30, 60, however many years, saying, I'm already sustainable. We've lived off the land, my family's lived off the land, this farm's been in our family for 3-4 generations or more, and we're gonna be passing it on, and if we weren't sustainable living off the land, we wouldn't be able to do this. And my comment back is, I don't disagree with you, but maybe through this process, we can help you think about something in a different way and help you do even better than what you're doing now. And it's getting that kind of barrier broken of, we're not the big food company coming in to tell you how to farm. And that's been a lot of what I do, is just building relationships within that too, and having those conversations and trying to let them know that we're there to understand and encourage them and help them maybe find some resources and tools that they didn't have before. So that's been the biggest challenge. And right now, just even breaking today, if you saw the headlines with the tariffs situation, We're seeing this not just with our program with the sign up as we've switched over, but a couple other programs in the state that we've checked in to see that have been going on cover crops and some funding and things. That sign up's been slow this year. I don't know if it's a combination of weather situation and it's been so cold, snowy, you name it, and the mindset's just not there yet. Or, thinking about the hay, especially if you're new to the cover crop area, which is what we're trying to recruit farmers that have never done this before to, in their mind, spend more money that they might not have that type of situation. So that's something that's just, hopefully that'll get resolved quickly, but that's something that I'm keeping an eye on and is potentially a challenge for us this year.
Definitely. Did you talk much in the planning of this about incentivizing outcomes versus practices, or?
We tried incentivizing outcomes in the past, and quite frankly, it hadn't worked, or at least the way we were doing it. So that's why we went to straight investing into with it. So we'll see how this one goes. We've made a 5-year commitment, obviously, and we're hoping to be able to get to, by the end of the 5 years, 100% of our supply for Hellman's oil to be enrolled in our program
That's
within
awesome.
the acres. So.
Cool. It's a great goal. And Charlie, I'm curious about your challenges that you're facing with, in general, with the program, maybe with some specific projects.
Sure, and where I'm at is a mountainous region, and we have mostly smaller farms, and small farms are struggling, and a lot of farms are struggling, and so it's figuring out how to make these farms profitable. How do we make sure that we're keeping farmers? How do we recruit new farmers? New farmers need to know that they can make a living farming in order to come into that and invest in it and to make it be a good decision for them. So that's an ongoing, constant struggle. The way that we're approaching it is we're trying to create a connected food system where the community is engaged in food and farming, and the farmers are as aware and innovative and entrepreneurial as they can be, and when they have the opportunities to sell into local markets, we're there trying to help them. And so it's all a kind of a balance that's going on of making sure that people are aware of farms, the importance of their decisions, both as consumers and as citizens, in supporting our farms, and then providing every opportunity for people to do that. And so that's just it's an ongoing thing. Agriculture is always in transition. Where I'm at, we are looking ahead 30 years, and I started thinking back where we were 30 years ago, and 30 years ago agriculture was tobacco. Where I'm from, there really wasn't much food being grown at all, and in a relatively short span of time we don't have tobacco at all anymore, but we're growing in the number of farmers we have there, and they're connecting people with their food, and it's actually, I think, exciting times.
Cool. That's awesome. So we have some good questions from the audience for you all. The first one that we can start with is, how are you all, and this is for all of you, how are you working to increase racial and gender inclusivity in food system improvement and diversification?
Wow.
It's a big one.
We started with not an easy one. That is a really good question, and I think a really tough one. But so General Mills has a very specific and directed supplier diversity program, in which we have a goal of how much volume we want to have in a diverse supplier base, women, minority, gay and lesbian owned, transgender owned farms and suppliers. So we have a specific goal and a full team that works on it. Is it going as fast as we'd like? Probably not. But I do think that providing internally sort of a team that focuses on it, a goal, and then measures against which we are all held responsible is part of the way that we handle and we approach within General Mills. We also have training programs, supplier diversity summits, and are looking, very specifically any time we're sort of out and about for, diverse suppliers and farmers to support our growing needs.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good question.
Women are leaders in sustainable agriculture, and food systems are things that the innovations are coming from the women farmers and women entrepreneurs and others. And I'm from a region that is a very white region for farming, and it's really tough to diversify that farming base. And I think it's important to remember, we're talking about food systems here, and most of the people that work in food systems aren't on the farm. They're in retail, they're somewhere else in the food system. The food system's one of the largest employers in the economy. It's some of the lowest paid, least upward mobility, least likely to have benefits. And, ironically, working in food, the most vulnerable group of people that are most dependent on some type of food assistance to put food on their own tables. And so it's really important, I think, for us, particularly when we're thinking about food systems, to think very expansively about who's engaged in the food system. And I think that's a way that we're gonna broaden the engagement, broaden the support, and hasten the transition of agriculture.
Is there anything that ASAP is doing to increase the wages earned by entities within the food system supply chain?
We don't work on that really directly. I am conflicted by it. It's a really hard thing to advocate for when you're advocating for farmers making more money and then to take on that aspect of it, and I don't know how to deal with it. It's something that I grapple with and try to figure out. I try to recognize it and know that it exists. The areas that we're very consciously looking at, the broadest audiences we can, is that we work in farm to school and we work with training of dietitians. We've got a dietetic intern training program that we're helping prepare people that are working with all communities to engage those communities in healthier eating and experiences of food and farming so that it begins to change and transform their lives.
Those experiences are very important.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. That's how you change people.
Yeah.
That's how things change.
Do you have any comments on?
Unilever's similar to General Mills. In fact, we're actually a little behind, but we'll be rolling out something similar within for our supply chain. We've been focused internally, actually, in getting it right for us first before we go out to our suppliers. So that's been what we've been focused on, but I think within the next 2 months, we'll be rolling that out, at least for North America, with our goals and within all of that. Our Ben & Jerry's brand on the wages, we've actually had an agreement towards the end of the year last year with Milk with Dignity in Vermont for the dairies up there and our Caring Dairy program. And so that's something that we're also looking at how that goes into the rest of our supply chain, also looking at the tomatoes and produce and such within that program.
Great, thank you. Beth, how might a beginning farmer scale up to become a partner with General Mills?
Well, you can be a partner still, even as a beginning farmer. We have no requirements for number of years in which you've been a farmer. We're actually looking to expand our direct farming program. Right now we're focused heavily in Montana, but it doesn't mean we aren't going to expand to other regions, and so we're kind of figuring that out. So I think we're gonna work on exactly how we turn that into something formal rather than meeting a couple farmers through friends and organizations that we know. We also have partners on the brokers and suppliers actually that we will always connect beginning farmers to, because that's actually one of the most exciting things to me is when I see someone who's either a new young farmer or a beginning farmer, anyone sort of making the leap into what is, incredibly challenging, but hopefully ultimately incredibly rewarding. And so we do want to support that. We don't have a particular goal necessarily around percentage of young farmers, but I think we can work with young farmers through either brokers, suppliers, or directly.
Cool. Mm-hmm. So you mainly reach your farmers through these other entities?
Mainly. Right now our direct farm program is actually quite small. So there's kind of less than a handful on the grain side, and then a little bit more heavily weighted for ranching through Epic. Because when we acquired Epic, they came with a few really great direct ranch partnerships for their protein.
There are a lot of questions in here about sort of the economic aspect of using conservation agricultural practices. So one of them is, what do we know about consumer support in your own communities or from the perspective of your company for grains grown using cover crops and other conservation practices? So I would even extend that question to just in general crops grown with conservation practices.
I'm curious as to what both of you are seeing. I'd love to understand how we can inform and educate consumers on why they need to buy things that are grown using these methods, and specifically cover crops. But as a random, if you're just sort of out there and you've got 30 seconds to make a decision in the store and you've got 2 screaming toddlers, how do we communicate that? We're working on that. So I've got some thoughts on it, but I'd love to hear other commentary on how we've educated consumers on.
I don't remember, and I should know this off the top of my head, but I don't. We did a study, I think it's been over a year ago, but there's definitely, for sustainable products anyways, there's definitely a huge market, and I think over a third are saying they're buying, and then over half of consumers, and this is worldwide, not just US, but looking, saying they want to buy them, and if they're educated and know, then we're hoping then they'll actually, do that at the cash register and purchase the item. I think the challenge those Beth got into is, how do we make cover crops sexy in a 30-second commercial? And that's very challenging for my Hellmann's brand. We did do some filming, actually, with Practical Farmers of Iowa. We've got a few videos that we just put together at the end of the year last year, talking with farmers, what are they, having them kind of describe it. And we still haven't released them. I think they're trying to figure out what to do. But that is a really big challenge on the marketing side, and who you're marketing to. Those videos are you're never going to see that in a 30-second commercial on TV. And in fact, the way marketing is going and the millennials and who it is, they're not watching those anyway. So we're really even in a switch right now within our marketing is looking at, okay, is it, Facebook ads, is it, how do you target your audience and where is that? And that is their expertise, not mine at all, but that's something that's definitely challenging is how do you describe this, make it very simple and easy to understand in 30 seconds to a minute, because that's really all the time you have. So what we're doing is, if you've seen the Hellmann's commercial, we actually filmed, I think it's been 3 years ago now, on the farm on one of our Hellmann's that supplies them, was in our program. We filmed a commercial on it, we did some extra stuff, and just trying to at least bring that link back that real American farmers, family farms, these are the people producing what's in there, and that's the first step, and now it's up to us to build off of it and talk about the stories and hopefully the impacts that we'll be seeing through our new program.
Well, one thing I want to recognize is I think we're on different scales here, and so most of the farms that I'm working with are having more direct connection with the people that are buying their foods, and at that end of it, there's conversations that are occurring, and so people that are talking to farmers are learning about food and how it's grown, and they're interested and they're asking questions and they're expecting that things be grown in sustainable ways, and there's a lot of conversation that still needs to be had, a lot of misunderstanding, both particularly from the farmers. You'll hear that the consumer's heard something, the person that's buying their food has heard something, and they're coming to them with a certain perspective, and they're having to talk to them about what it really means to grow food and how it's grown. But it's moving the needle. So these conversations are both helping farmers understand what the people that are eating the food want in their food, even if that's formative and it's developing. And they're changing the way they grow, and they're better communicating it to the people that are eating the food. And at the same time, people are coming to markets, they're coming to meet their farmers, they're asking about how things are being grown, and they're learning new things and having some of their perceptions challenged there through that process. And what's been exciting about this that kind of gets at some of the scale issue too is that when people are meeting the farmers there at market and they're learning something new and they're having that experience and they're getting engaged, and they're seeking out those products in other venues. So they're going to the grocery store and they're looking for that farm name or something that they know is authentic. There's a real craving for transparency. People want to know where their food comes from. They want to know how it's grown. I think the ability for people to know more about all these things is increasing. And the generation after mine and after that one is expecting that they can have more information about where their food comes from. I think there's a real awareness of the impact of our food system on our health, on farmers, on workers, on the environment, and that more and more people want a food system that supports their values, that they're making decisions about where they buy food, about who they buy it from, that are supporting the kind of community they want, the kind of investments in the people there that they live around. And so there's an aspect of this that, you know, from where I work, that's very much about creating that interaction and creating that space where people can learn firsthand, have an experience that becomes personal to them, that they then can take that out and help make change in other places.
That's huge, yeah. Definitely sounds like you have an advantage in really connecting people with producers on the, you know, smaller, more local scale. So we need to find a way to simulate that more for the work that you two are doing, definitely.
Yeah, the community aspect is incredibly important, and we need to figure out how to support and maintain that as hopefully this, you know, sustainable, organic, regenerative agriculture becomes as big as conventional.
Definitely. We have time for just one more question before some closing remarks. So, okay, thanks, Rob. So I was wondering if you all in your work feel responsibility for rural communities at all, and how that manifests itself.
Absolutely. I was looking for, I thought one of our partners was going to be in here. I was looking for him, but you know, we have recently launched sort of this regenerative agriculture framework or platform. And don't roll your eyes at the word regenerative. I know it's sort of all the rage right now, but the idea really being outcome-based, right? And that it's an umbrella that everyone can be under. So it's not, you know, just certified organic or one thing. It's outcome-based in 3 areas. It's not just sustainable, you're regenerating. So through underground biodiversity, soil health, soil carbon, to oversimplify, above ground biodiversity as measured by beneficial insects and native pollinators, and then economic regeneration. This idea that this is better for farmers, farm communities, and farm economics. We have not yet landed on a final measure for how we actually measure that. We'd love to be able to say that these types of farms and these types of farming communities, if you are supporting soil health and biodiversity, that you yourself have a higher average, you know, acreage profit than other farms, and that certainly, you know, your communities are better off. We've got a partner who is very proud of the fact that his average employee is getting a significantly higher median income than the entire county in which his operation is in, and I love that. I don't feel like I can ask all of the farmers that information though. And so right now we're trying to understand through just the number of farmers that do farm in these ways, and through direct farm partnerships, you know, can we improve farming economics, communities, and the impact on our rural communities? Because, you know, I think about somewhere between 13 and 15% of all sort of North American consumers are kind of what we call this all-in. Food is a political statement for them. You know, it's about sustainability, but it's also about farm communities. It's about, you know, family farms and things like that. And so, you know, in order to support that, the idea of organic and sustainable is kind of a proxy for this all-in idea. And so we know that it is not just always about the soil, that there is a very intentional, I guess, there's a lot of intention in buying these products because you think that it is supporting rural communities in the United States. So I think we are trying to figure out how we better support that.
Yeah.
Yes, boy, it's the perfect place for the conversation between rural communities and other communities to happen is around food. It's so social, it's so personal. You know, we just don't have the food systems that are going to feed all of the urban populations without our rural communities, and food is the place where the dialogue is occurring, where the understandings can happen. And when we were growing tobacco in Western North Carolina, there was less of a connection to the community, and when policy changes and global markets changed, it devastated our rural communities, the amount of farmer loss with the end of tobacco. And where I'm at with Burley Tobacco, we lost tobacco, and 30 years ago, half the farms in my region would have grown tobacco. Today, there are fewer than 100, and so it's a tremendous change that's occurred there that's pretty invisible outside of those rural communities. It's pretty invisible that that kind of devastation occurred in these rural counties, and the emergence of food is making that connection back up into these communities, and some of that conversation is occurring again about what the importance of these rural communities to our food system.
As twofold, as part of our Sustainable Agriculture Code, we actually have a section on community within there, and that's part of it. It's a practice-based code, but that's part of what it is to make sure farmers that we're working with that are community, and we're supporting that economically. And then one of the things with the cover crop program is showing over the 5 years that the economics work and such. But you know, for me, it's personal. I grew up in Iowa in the 80s during the farm crisis, and I'm seeing comparisons and different things hinting out there what's going on. You see obviously what's going on in the dairy industry. My aunt and uncle, I grew up there, and they had a dairy farm. So this is personal to me too, as I watch this, and I want, you know, you want to see these farms succeed and do that. So everything that we're doing is making sure we want to strengthen that and encourage that and help them be on the land longer and have reduced costs maybe by some of these practices that we can help them with. So it's very important to us.
Definitely. Thank you all for that. Just to close things off, ending on a high note, I'd love it if you could take maybe about a minute or less and tell us, you know, what gives you hope and energy and keeps you motivated every day when you're back on the daily grind doing your work.
What choice do we have? I mean, what choice do we have, right? It's it's advice I give my son all the time, but I have a 9-year-old precocious child, perfect, of course, but and I always say to him, you don't always have to be the best, but you always have to be the one that tries the hardest. And that's just as much for him as it is for me. This is an impossible task that you all are doing. This journey it's a killer. Are you all tired? Who's tired? Who's exhausted? It just never ends. You know, it's 2 steps forward, 3 back sometimes. But I feel like, I'm not going to remember the exact letter, but I was just got a book called Letters of Note, and it was, you know, just correspondence between people that the author felt like needed a wider audience. And there was one in particular that's so perfect for right now. It was in, I think, 1978. Obviously things, you know, in the country it was not a high note, so to speak. But a reader wrote to E.B. White, and I'm sure everyone knows E.B. White, Charlotte's Web, Stuart Little. And so he obviously is he means a lot to a lot of people, but the reader wrote to him and said, you know, I feel despair about the state of the world and where we're at, and I don't know how to go on. And his response was something along the lines of, as long as there's one person with integrity and one person who still cares, he will get up on Sunday morning and wind the clock, because that's what he has to do. Technology we've really effed ourselves with some technology and gotten to the place that we're at. But then technology can then also help us move forward. And as long as there's one person, and there's always one person, obviously everyone in this room, so I come to these conferences, I see these faces, and I know that there's at least one person or at least 100 people who are still going to work at this for 30 years. who are going to do this. And as long as there's one person, we're still going to get up and wind the clock and make sure that we're continuing on this journey, because what other choice do we have?
Yeah.
One of the things that makes me feel optimistic is seeing young people coming back to the farm and next generations being excited about farming again. And where I'm at and working in local food systems are something that are very inspiring to the new generations of farmers. And I can remember being in a room, we've got an apple growing region in Western North Carolina that there was a Gerber baby food that processed apples, and when Gerber closed down, it was similar impacts to the end of tobacco in our region. The farmers didn't really have anywhere to go, and similar to tobacco farmers too, there's not a lot you can do when you got an apple orchard in and you don't have anywhere to sell your apples. And being in a room full of farmers and hearing farmers say, I'm telling my kids not to come back to the farm. This is not a life for you anymore. And some of those same apple farmers today have shifted their models to selling into local markets and to branding their products and to looking at U-Pick and direct sales and others. And their kids are coming back to the farms, and the kids are excited about it. And they're the ones that are out there bringing new energy to the farm and new innovation. And that's happening across a lot of older ag in my region. And that inspires me. And it's what leaves me at the end of the day, which can be, frequently wearing in trying to figure out all the different things that need to happen in order for farmers to be successful, that keeps you going and keeps you trying to come up with new things.
Thank you.
For me, it's the farmers. Whenever I can get out of the office and in the fields, seeing, learning, developing the relationships, that's what keeps me going, because there's so many great things going on out there. And just that gives me hope. And I agree, the next generation is definitely out there thinking about things a little different way. And they're willing to try some new things maybe and have that, so.
Definitely. So if anyone's feeling down, just go out to a farm. Get your hands dirty. Thank you all so much. Can we give them a round of applause?
Thank you. Nice job. Thank you. Yeah.